The head of AppSoc said to me, he said, "This is the single best investment that we've ever made in our operators." It's because everybody was using it, right? It's like you can have equipment that collects dust, or you can have equipment that's being used, and everybody was using it. And my point here is just like, yes, to answer your question, you can go at this different elevation and sell it in at the top, but we just didn't see the buy-in. Like we've done that even like with like corporate gyms, if you will, right? You sell it at the top, and now you're playing this game to really get it sold to each coach. When it's their idea, it goes much better. I used to have this mentor. He said, if you help them plan the fight, then they won't fight the plan.
Cash flow. Cash flow. Did you clear your cash flow?
I got Josh Sutchar here today. Josh is one of the founders of TrainHeroic. You guys have since merged with a larger brand. I want to get into all that and some of the M&A stuff you guys went through. TrainHeroic, it's an online training platform for coaches and athletes. Josh, let's dive right in. Tell me about TrainHeroic, and I'd love to hear more about your story today.
Awesome. Yeah, Brian, first of all, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'll start with the story and sort of how this idea came to life. So Ben Crookston, college buddy of mine, a teammate of mine at the University of San Diego, had this idea. Both of us were from Chicago. Just a little bit of background: we went to school in San Diego, so we just became buddies there. And when we graduated, I was coaching at my alma mater back in Chicago, or in the suburbs of Illinois. Ben was coaching and teaching at a school in the inner city Chicago called Perspectives. And I think for both of us, we got really lucky playing college football, in that we had this coach, Jim Harbaugh, at the time. He had brought a strength conditioning coach named Shannon Turley. We had gone through a couple coaches while we were there, but all the while we had these strength coaches that were teaching us things at 22 years old that we wish we knew when we were 12 or 15 or 18. And the reality for us, like, we had a specific goal, and it was to play pro football. I think that's like, generally as a kid and a naive kid, you think, hey, that's what you're going to do, right? You typically want to do whatever you're doing at the highest level. At least that's how it was for us. So
I wanted to be a rock star.
Exactly. Right? You're not just playing Guitar Hero. You're trying to be a rock star. And I think the reality for us is, like, we had a desire, we had a willingness to do the thing, but we didn't know what the thing was. And, again, at 22 years old, once you understood what the thing was, and when I say the thing, I mean like what it takes to train to be the best at your sport, or at least achieve your full potential. That's ultimately what it came down to, right? And so when we were teaching and coaching, what we realized is, God, these kids don't know anything. We didn't know anything. They don't know anything. There has to be more people like this. And again, at this time, it was 2009. Even like tech, it was, like, it was far and far away from where it is now. Then, like, there was even just like this surge in the app world, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, I want to build an app.
That was the start of the mobile revolution back then.
Exactly. And so what we thought is, hey, we ought to seek to bring this information to the masses. Let's start small. Let's start specific. Let's start with high school football, and let's teach them how to train for their sport. And so Ben's not technical. I'm not technical. So we thought, we ought to bring somebody in that is technical, that understands this world, because in order to do this at scale, we think we need to kind of get into this app world, get into the mobile app world, and deliver it that way. And so we had linked up actually with a teammate of ours at the time, and he was in Silicon Valley. He was like from the Bay, and he was involved in a separate startup. And long story short, we ended up raising money with the team of three of us. We had done some testing before that and try to prove some assumptions that we had, that one, kids like to compete, all of these things that we felt in our just daily lives, but kind of in a more gamified, structured way that we eventually would create an app out of.
I want to stick on that for just 1 second.
Yeah.
How old were you guys when you raised that round?
22.
Nice, man.
Actually, we were 20, maybe 23 and 24.
Where did you raise? How much did you raise, and where did you raise from at that age and with that vision?
Yeah, so we were in Chicago, which I didn't understand until then, but it's a more conservative market in terms of like what people are willing, at least the folks that we had interfaced with. These were all friends and family. And so Ben was working also at a CrossFit gym in the mornings early. And so he had this network of people that would go to that gym, and they understood that vision. Oftentimes they were like former athletes. And this was in a neighborhood called River North in Chicago. So it was a nicer neighborhood, more affluent population. And there were basically 20 people that gave us like, between 20 and 40,000 bucks a pop. But we raised 500,000 through friends, first, like,
Did you
friends
set up like a SPV or something, like a special purpose vehicle, and have like LPs on like a LLC that's on the cap table, or did you have all those 20 people on the cap table of Train Heroic?
Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
The latter. Actually, these were like convertible notes was the vehicle. Yeah.
Cool.
So at that time, so now we had money, and we were thinking, okay, we ought to figure out the best use for this money. Well, right after we raised the money, we lost that technical co-founder. So now we got two guys, 500,000 bucks. We don't know a lick about technology. We do feel really like we are seeing traction in what we're trying to do. We have, like, we've been meeting with high schools, and we have people that are let's just call it like pre-order this product and are ready for it, or at least willing to pay for it. And so then we ended up like hiring a contractor firm. So we probably made like 10,000 mistakes along the way. That was the first. They were great. I don't know, like, knock on them, but the willingness to work on something full time, to respond, react to it in the way that you need to, especially in those early days when you're learning, you need somebody. At least we felt like at the time, you need somebody that's there, that's in-house, that understands the pain the customers are going through, and that are doing this as often and at the frequency and intensity that you are. So we ended up building a product, and it took longer than we wanted, but it was a web-based product. And so this was, it felt and looked like an app. At least that's like, in terms of like what the expectations were in 2011 at the time that this kind of came to life. People would like whatever, save it to their home screen, right? And they'd click on it and felt like an app, but it was web-based. And so what we found is that actually in using this inside a weight room, the responsiveness was like much slower than you needed it to be. These places like oftentimes didn't have the connectivity that you wanted to, right? So you're like in the basement of a school maybe, or even in some brick and mortar facility with like thick walls. They don't need technology there. At least they didn't at the time. And so the user experience was, it was lacking. I mean, like you would do the thing, and on paper it felt like, hey, this is a really good idea. Then in practice, you'd see athletes like going through their sets and reps and looking to kind of click the button, and it wasn't responding, right? There's like calculations being made in real time, and it just didn't perform the way that you needed it to perform. But so anyways, that kind of was the beginning of the beginning, if you will, in terms of like, all right, there are a million things that we need to do to make this technology smoother and faster, and actually make it deliver the value that we believe it could deliver. Because, initially it was about the content, and it was about, we need to show people how to do the thing. Then what we realized, there's layers to this thing. It's not just about the content. It's about how do you keep people engaged, mostly how you keep them connected to their coach, to their mission, to their purpose. And there are ways that we can do that.
So do you guys provide like a virtual coach through your platform, or?
Yeah, good question. So this was like, I'll call this like 1.0, right? So in 1.0, we thought that we were going to be the content creators, and we were initially. So like we actually had a coach that was one of our college strength and conditioning coaches that built this plan for high school athletes. So the target customer at that point was like typically like a high school football coach that had good intentions, had even like a good program, but just didn't feel comfortable in the weight room. They were tasked with the job to like develop the strength conditioning program, develop their athletes. But they might have been a really good defensive coordinator and a good head coach and a good English teacher, a great father, but like they just didn't understand what to do in that room. So they brought us in as like, okay, sure, it's delivered through technology, but I'm buying this program. And the value to them was actually the program. Maybe some of the allure was the technology, but the technology was almost like a necessary evil to get the program. At least in the early days.
When you say program, it's like not like a software program, but the program, like the fitness program.
Yeah, the training program. Exactly.
Training program. Yeah, cool.
Yep. So that was like 1.0 days, and then as you kind of started, as we started understanding the market a little bit better, and as we started interfacing with prospects and customers, what we found is there were some high schools with strength conditioning coaches. So that meant that they were experts there that were really excited about the technology and the ability to use technology to deliver their training to their athletes and their students and track that progress and do the things that we were able to do through our tech. But they wanted control. They wanted control over the content. In fact, they wanted our content gone so they could put their content in there. And we had just through a string of luck had gotten introduced to like some bigger universities. We were working with like UCLA at that point. That coach introduced us to some folks in the tactical world. We were working with in Coronado. There's a team of Navy SEALs that we were working with, and so we kind of just got into these different verticals, if you will, and they ended up just being sort of I'd say the catalyst to help us grow the business. Like when we got in the tactical world, those folks then told everybody in the tactical world, and that world is just small, right? So it's like, okay, now you're on both coasts working with the Navy. Okay, now you're working with the Marines and the Air Force and the Army, and there are different like SOCOM units within there, and they needed this in a bad way. I think like what we found is once we were able to open up the technology so that the coach could be the expert, and now we were just a tool, that made our market, that 100x our market.
How much
share,
of your revenue is that military user base versus just like your everyday gym athlete or sports athlete?
Yeah, so I think like I'll call that 2.0, 3.0 is probably today where the majority is in the like commercial market. So even today, like at that point, I'd say like 50 or 60% of our revenue was from that tactical or like that tactical world, right? And the rest was from like the academic world, your high schools, your colleges. And as we built the technology, and even as we got like a bit more tight on who our target was, and their willingness to pay, and there are complications with every market for sure, but in like the tactical world and in the academic world, they're just the buyer's different than your user. The decision-making process is long. The bureaucratic process is long. The billing stuff is a little bit more complex. So we found like much faster traction, and even a bigger market in the commercial world. We're talking like personal trainers, small gyms, even large gyms. So today, like 80% of our revenue comes from those folks.
I want to take a quick break from the episode and say, if you're enjoying this content, the best way you can say thank you is to subscribe. So if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, hit the subscribe button there as well. And also share it out to your friends and colleagues. If you find this content useful and you think other people will enjoy it as well, please send it out. And back to the episode. It's crazy. It's like never a straight line in these things to get a company up and running and working and firing on all cylinders. It's, you just shared 3 different stages of evolution for how you guys got to where you are today.
And it's all, for us, it was just about finding product market fit, and as we got closer and closer to product market fit, like it just became much more obvious as to like what we needed to become, what we needed to do to really hit that, nail on the head and things like that. And that sort of informed the decisions on the tech. Before we had product market fit, there was so much to do because we were trying to serve so many masters, if you will. And we just didn't have the team to execute that. Even today, we wouldn't have the team to execute that, in terms of like
do
serving
like an everything product.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's niching down is so important. I'm constantly figuring out how we can niche down more in my own company. I talk to founders, especially new founders all the time about focusing on niche, not trying to be everything to everybody, just really having a lane and sticking to it. It just makes everything so much easier. It makes your marketing and sales easier. You can reuse your sales and marketing assets more easily, and your message can get more laser targeted and resonates better with your prospects. And then also, what you do to service customers and how you build out features in your application, it's just more aligned towards a single vision or a single customer in need.
100%.
It just makes everything so much easier and better for it's easier to build and better to sell.
Totally
resonates better.
I tell so my job now is we have this like training marketplace. So I talked about like selling into these different parts of the market, if you will. We have like a training marketplace. The vision for that is to have a one-stop shop to go find the best training and coaches in the world, regardless of what you're training for, right? You might be training for a marathon or for a triathlon or to be an NFL player or just to look good naked, right? But regardless of what you're training for, you go to this marketplace, you go find coaches in the marketplace, and we're basically a business in a box for those coaches. So they use our platform to create and deliver their training. And then when an athlete or you or me want to achieve some goal, we go there, we pay for the training, probably a monthly membership or a one-time purchase for a program, and we get that delivered through the app. It comes with community, and that coach is somewhat connected to us in a more generic sense. Like they have basically it's like Facebook, a Facebook group kind of jammed into the app. It's all native and done from the app, but that's the value. My point here is those coaches oftentimes want to build a product or a membership for everybody. And my sentiment always, like, if you're for everybody, then you're for nobody. And you like even for those, like some of our top selling coaches have like these really, really narrow focuses, and they do great because it speaks specifically to that person. And when that person gets there, it fits and it gets them to exactly where they're trying to go, rather than just kind of this generic offering.
Yeah. So you shared three phases of your evolution, and ultimately you ended up on what you were calling this commercial use case, like this kind of like athlete use case. And how did you know, like you pivoted twice to get there, and how did you know that you needed to pivot? Like what metrics were you looking at? Was it like daily active users or churn rate or customer acquisition cost, or like some specific metric that didn't look right to you guys? How did you know that you needed to pivot each time? And when you got to this third evolution of TrainHeroic, how did you know that you hit it, that you were like in the groove and now it's time to like buckle down and just do it? What metrics were you looking at?
Yeah. Good question. So I think I'd say like loosely several, more generically, like engagement metrics really drove most of the decision making. In terms of the market too, I think some of that, that's less metrics, but more like opportunity. The market for the commercial space is just much bigger. There's so like personal trainers, and you look in terms of like, all the coaches in the world, most of those are personal trainers, if you will. Like some of them have logos and they're, at Ohio State or the Denver Broncos and things like that. And don't get me wrong, like we serve those people well, but the commercial coach, that market's just massive. Now, what we found in our selling cycle was that the decision maker at those bigger institutions and universities wasn't the person that was buying or wasn't the person using the product. So the sale was a bit more complex, right? They had to go and so we had to sell it to the user, and the user had to go sell it to the buyer. And then oftentimes out of our control, we would see churn because that user would leave that university and go somewhere else, or the buyer would leave the university and go somewhere else. And like the turnover at that institution was so high that it was just hard to do the thing consistently there. Sometimes that would be a benefit to you because you would leave, let's say, you'd leave like Ohio State and that person would go to Wisconsin. Okay, well now you're working with Ohio State and Wisconsin because they wanted to take you there and you're already embedded at Ohio State. But oftentimes that person would leave and go to the new school, and the new school was doing something else, and so you'd lose them both. And there were just many things outside of our control. The commercial world was really interesting because
these types of organizations should just be like a single person that's kind of like your user, or is there a way to like make it more infectious where it kind of spreads out into other users?
Yeah, there definitely is. What we found, again, we'd look at like engagement as a leading indicator to whether or not an account was going to have a long lifetime value or churn early, if you will. And what we found is that grassroots gave us the best engagement, meaning like it came from some champion at the school rather than like going to the AD, for example. Like one of our best use cases is this group called AFSOC, which is the Air Force Special Operations Command. And eventually AFSOC's like head of command came and said, hey, we want this for everybody in AFSOC, all these different units, if you will. But the way that happened was like we started at the ground level with like one coach within AFSOC that was like, yo, I really want this, right? So he had his unit using it and got permission to use it with his unit. And then it had spread to another unit. So by the time that, the head came to us, it was already being used really well. It was like it was just a really fun account to look at the metrics. You were like, holy cow, like look at how
at that point they're coming to you and probably saying, instead of like you trying to sell them on implementing this at the whole company, they're probably coming to you and saying something like, hey, this thing's like spread already throughout my whole organization. So I want like some insight into who's using it, how they're using it, what are the metrics? Can we roll this into one bill? They're probably more coming to you with that conversation, I imagine.
The head of AppSoc said to me, he said, "This is the single best investment that we've ever made in our operators." It's because everybody was using it, right? It's like you can have equipment that collects dust, or you can have equipment that's being used, and everybody was using it. And my point here is just like, yes, to answer your question, you can go at this different elevation and sell it in at the top, but we just didn't see the buy-in. Like we've done that even like with like corporate gyms, if you will, right? You sell it at the top, and now you're playing this game to really get it sold to each coach. When it's their idea, it goes much better. I used to have this mentor. He said, if you help them plan the fight, then they won't fight the plan. And that's kind of been our strategy. Is you actually are planning the fight with that lower level coach. They're using the thing, and then they go up and buy it. So I think, like, to answer your question in terms of like, how did we know we needed to pivot and stuff like that? Looking at engagement metrics, what we found to be the best use cases and engagement was that private coach, because they had really how do we frame it at the time? It was like not so the coach, we thought of the coach as like commercially incentivized. Right. The coach is doing this because he has a chance to grow his business, or she has a chance to grow her business and make money. Now, the user was commercially incentivized too in that scenario. They were paying for this service. And therefore, there was a different level of commitment. Where even when you were at a high school, like myself and Ben, we were pretty motivated athletes. We wanted to do the thing. But out of 100 athletes, what we found from an engagement perspective is like 25 of them were really motivated. 75 just maybe wanted to put on a jersey or for whatever reason didn't want to train hard. So that commercial environment showed us like very clear through the metrics that there are people that are motivated to do this thing. They have a higher willingness to pay. They can make decisions faster. And it just was frictionless. Like, like you'll go on a date with somebody and like, when it's going to work because it's easy, right? Like that's how it was the whole while with my wife and myself. Is like, oh, this is really easy. This is really fun. And that it fits, and it just fits. That's kind of how it felt when we got into the right, when we found product market fit.
Yeah. Have you ever read The Challenger Sale?
No.
That's a good book. We'll link it in the show notes. Okay. I actually implemented that at my company, just the methodology of it. But it's very, like, a lot of the stuff you're talking about is right out of the Challenger playbook. Don't try to go and like sell the top and then get the top to go sell their team. It's better to go and build the champions, speak the language to each individual champion, and then the sale just happens at the top level once you have the whole the whole kind of like champion force behind you rooting for your platform.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of concepts of like teaching your customers, taking control of the sale, kind of like taking the customer through taking the prospect through a journey of understanding, learning new things that they didn't know before, and then understanding like the emotional impact of what those new things that they've just learned have on their business or, their revenue or their risk profile or whatever. A lot of that stuff I'm hearing you kind of just naturally talk about, which is really cool. It's like, the Challenger Sale is like this new, it's like relatively new. I think it's like a 10-year-old methodology that's very much born out of the tech, complex solutions sale.
Cool. Thanks for that. The Challenger Sale. I'll check it out.
Cool. Yeah. So that's awesome. I mean, it really sounds like you guys had quite a journey. So how long have you been in this like phase 3, I think we're calling it, of your evolution, where you've just really found your niche, you found your customer, and you're just like in growth mode? How long has that been going on for?
So like just from a timeline perspective, we started this thing in 2012. We like Ben and I were working on it in 2011, but 2012 was like when we actually got going. In 2014 was our second round of our like real raise. So we ended up moving to Boulder. We merged with this company called Training Peaks, who was in Boulder at the time. Training Peaks was and they still are they're the leader in the endurance space in terms of connecting coaches to athletes. So if you're a Tour de France athlete that has won the Tour de France, you use Training Peaks. Your coach uses Training Peaks. All those top teams use Training Peaks, and they've been in the market for, for 30 plus years. But Training Peaks, and just even in the cycling and endurance world, there wasn't a willingness to strength train. So there wasn't a lot of like strength conditioning. In fact, there were no strength conditioning tools built into Training Peaks. So they were trying to build those, and that's how why they found us and why they invested in us and moved us out to Boulder. So that was in 2014. And so I'd say like phase 2 really started in 2014. And then we got to phase 3 quickly from 2014. So I'd say like probably like 2016. And in terms of growth, there's one thing to have like product market fit, and then there's another thing to have like the means to serve it. So when we moved to Boulder, there were 3 of us. And we grew the team. We grew the team from like probably 3 to 12 between 2014 and 2016. And then we grew the team to about 25 between 2016 and 2020. And in 2020, we kind of more officially merged with Training Peaks. There's still 2 products that are serving the market, but there's one team serving both products. So now there's about 90 on the team. And we moved the office from Boulder, a little bit south of Boulder, in this town called Louisville. Everywhere else in the world calls it Louisville, but it's Louisville in Colorado.
Boulder's Colorado is such a great place for a business like this, man. It's there's so much tech out there. There's a lot of VC out there, and literally every single person in Colorado is like an athlete of some kind. Like everyone's so outdoorsy. They're snowboarding, skiing, hiking, mountain biking. Everyone just like plans their life around like being in shape and doing adventurous stuff. So it's like I feel like you guys are in the absolute right place for what you're doing.
And it's been what we found, even from a recruiting standpoint. It's like there were people that we wanted to bring onto the team in Chicago, but like you're pre-revenue or you barely have any, you're just kind of asking people to hitch their wagon to this dream. They have to really believe in it. It was tough to recruit in Chicago. In fact, it was even tough for us to recruit in Boulder to a degree, because Boulder's community at the time we were there was smaller. The tech scene was smaller. We actually moved the company to Denver, away from Training Peaks, like in an effort to recruit and bring on people like you're talking about. And what we found and what we learned, many things from Training Peaks, but one thing that I found to just be so cool, and something I never really paid any attention to, was like Training Peaks would always recruit and hire. One quality that they'd recruit and hire was called like authenticity. And it meant that like the person got it, that they, in their world, typically like their accountant was like also a triathlete, and they'd all go on like lunch rides, and their developers were using the app because they loved the app and they needed it. And so there was a different like level. It was almost like that kind of founder feeling, in that like, hey, I have a passion for this project. It's not just my job. And so that was a layer that we would layer into, interview process and stuff like that. And eventually we got, like, for a while, we were pretty maniacal about that. Like, are they a user? Are they a coach? Are they an athlete? Right? Like, let's go look at their training history, for example, like through the app. And if we couldn't like find examples of those, like that was maybe a sign that like this wasn't a thing for them. Or are they using like a similar app? Do they understand
It's so smart, man. I mean, just think about the difference. I'm going to bring this into like, brick and mortar retail, but like think about the difference between the shopping experience at REI versus Dick's. Like
Yep.
Dick's is just like, just put anyone in and it's like willing to work at like this low wage or whatever. Like it just, retail, just hire retail people, plug them in. They could be coming from Walmart or whatever.
Yep.
REI, like every single person in that store, you can tell that like as soon as they clock out, like they're going to be kayaking, they're going to be hiking, they're,
right.
Whatever their thing is, like, they're working there because they love it. Like that's their life.
Yep.
And it's just like the customer experience. Like if I want to go and, like buy a mountain bike, I know that like if I go to REI, I'm going to be talking to someone who's really passionate about mountain bikes and knows all the details of the bike that they're trying to sell me. And they're going to sell me the right bike because they know all the things about sizing and how I'm going to be using it. And, what makes the most sense if I need like, tubeless tubeless wheels, all that kind of stuff. Like they know all the nuances of it.
See, and you trust them. And imagine if that person was building your bike, right? So that's what we saw on the engineering side, is like, you can tell an engineer what to do if you have the vision, and you have to be like really, really close to it all the time. But when the engineer understands the thing because they use the thing, and they can tell you, no, there's a better way to to do this, or have we thought about, like, we've had engineers that truly, like, in their training session were like, this sucks, and then like the next day there'd be some iteration of some improvement on that, on that thing that sucked in the app, and you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense to show the training history right in line as you're logging your workout, so you know what you did last time, and just nuance like that, and that made it, honestly, that made it more fun. It wasn't like people were working on your thing, it's like we were working on our thing, and I think for culture, that did more for our culture than anything else. So yeah, we're lucky to see that firsthand in order to sort of intentionally do it.
That's so smart, man. It's such a smart move you guys did. I want to change gears. There's a lot of like interesting influencers in the fitness space. But one that's like really interesting to me from a business perspective is Alex Hormozi.
Yep.
I'm sure you probably know about him. What do you think about him? Like, being in the fitness and athlete space, like, what do you think about him? He had that whole gym launch company. He's doing the acquire.com thing, or acquisition.com, I think it is now. Acquire.com is a different thing. But yeah, it's interesting dude. He's been highly successful, and it's, I don't know if it's his personality, like just like the handlebar mustache and like the, big biceps, wearing like the tank top look, the sideways hat look that he's got, or what, but he seems to be crushing it in the fitness space.
Yeah. I think, like, for when we got into the commercial space, the problem that we were trying to solve initially, which was like help people achieve their potential, right? And we were kind of focused on the athlete in that way, like help them achieve their potential. I like, and when we got into the commercial space, it was our focus shifted to the coach, and it was help a coach grow and scale their business. And the industry, I mean, all industries see some type of, turnover and churn or whatever, right? Your doctors will burn out, your coaches will burn out, but the coaching industry looks different than any industry that I've been close to, in that, like, a coach just doesn't make it. They don't. They stick to it for 3 years. And the reality is this: they either get so successful that they work themselves out of a job. I just can't handle this anymore. I'm burnt out. I can only train, 8 personal training clients a day. And that means that, I might be able to make, let's say, like $100,000 if I'm like just absolutely killing it, if my rates are higher than market. But then I start to have a family. So now I can't maybe have, 8 sessions a day. I got to go to 6. So my, income is reduced because I'm trading time for money. And that's what I'm doing as a coach. Well, now I have a family. It's just, the long-term being able to coach just didn't work. It doesn't fit. And then you can go to different environments. Like, let's take, like, I keep throwing like Ohio State, but just, high level football, high demand, stressful gig. They're spending 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the facility. Right. And granted, like, they might not even be busy during the day. They need to be there as a resource because guys are coming, girls are coming. They need to be there for those athletes. Well, like, there's no time left in the day. Not to mention, those folks aren't getting paid. Like, they're getting paid, but not anything significant. The head guy is maybe, but nobody else. And so you had these coaches that were overworked and underpaid. And then you go to a brick and mortar facility. And I think, again, I'm sorry to be so like industry specific, but you have these gyms, right? A lot of these coaches, their dream was, I want to own my own gym. And what we started to see is, like, they were almost like building their own jail, right? They'd build this facility or buy a facility, and then they'd be, in a place where they couldn't leave that facility. Like, they had to open it. Exactly. So that, there's like any business, you have your break even point. Maybe, okay, hey, we need 200 members here. Right. So they get to the 200 member point. Okay. Now, now every member is revenue, or is profit, and we're in a better place. But it's really hard to find people to manage those gyms. It's really hard there are many, many jobs to be done, but you're there, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. because those are the concentrated areas when people can actually, get to the gym. It just, oftentimes you had these people that were creating something that they wanted so badly, and they got to the thing and they realized, this isn't like the life that I wanted. Right. So they like, there was a real problem in the industry in churn. And ultimately, like, we had to show coaches ways to
churn in the gym users, or churn in the gym owners.
Yeah. Good clarity. In the gym owners. At least, like, I feel like the ones that, and don't get me wrong, like, some people will stick it out, but it wasn't a very, like, there's some fulfillment there. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's value that they're creating, but it's not like necessarily a sustainable lifestyle. And so I think, like, the problem that Alex solves, and we're in a similar game, is like, he's showing people how to scale their business and make more money. And that was such a problem. And there was such a pain that it resonated with people. And Alex is a super bright guy. You know, a lot of this is luck and right time, right place. And he was right time, right place and said the right thing and has, you know, awesome examples of how to do it. So I think like, you know, people in the industry speak really highly of Alex. I don't know him personally, but yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I've seen him on a few podcasts, and it's so interesting. Like his business model, like the gym launch thing, you know, the playbook basically, which is it's almost kind of like what you guys are doing for trainers in a way, I think, kind of like laying out the playbook. It's such a good business model because, you know, it just people who have, you know, a lot of people are not business savvy. They just have, you know, like you said, they have a passion to do something. They want to do that thing that they love doing, and they want to make a living doing it. But they don't know how to run Facebook ads. They don't know how to install Facebook pixels. They don't know how to, you know, run a sales funnel. They don't know how to price their services properly or do a P&L or, you know, look at their finances or manage a CRM. Like all that stuff is foreign to them. They just want to go and like help people, you know, put on more muscles and, you know, like you said, look better naked. So like when you have like a blueprint for how to do that someone can take it and just like implement it, and you can, you know, measure, you can see, all right, now I make, you know, I'm doing the same business, but now I'm less stressed, less exhausted, and making more money out of it. That's a great business model, in my opinion. And it's also scalable too. Like I think the interesting thing that, you know, that Alex has talked about on podcasts that I've listened to is that, you know, he was doing the gyms himself at the beginning. And first he had one gym and then two, and then, you know, he had like 5 or 6 at some point. And then he was talking to some mentor, and they're like, why are you scaling gyms? Like, why are you building more gyms? Why not just like take this model that you've used to create your gyms and sell that to all the gyms in the country? And so that was a brilliant move. I'm sure he would have done well with doing gyms. He probably maybe would have had like 20 or 30 gyms someday, and maybe, you know, cash flowed a few $1 million a year off of it. But I think he's probably doing 100 times better than that at this point.
Totally. And just the impact too. Like I believe in the industry, and I believe in the value that it creates. And not just now, I think that value is even, you know, going in that direction. But like his ability to scale his impact, I think in his current business model is like nothing he'd be able to do in a brick and mortar type of setup. So it's a cool deal. And we need it in a bad way.
Was my comparison to like what you guys are doing for like personal trainers to what he did for gyms, is that like a accurate comparison, would you say?
I think the value, I think like we're both seeking to deliver the same value. How he's doing it and how we're doing it is a little bit different. Like he focuses much heavier on education, right? And like, so like he would be a great partner for us, right? Where we compare him with the 10,000 coaches that we work with that could all find value in what Alex is doing. But again, like the objective, the goal that we're each trying to get to is the same, and that's like help coaches grow and scale their business.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
I think he actually sold it. I heard. I think he sold Gym Launch a few years ago.
Yeah.
Cool. So what's the future, man, for TrainHeroic, for Training Peaks, for the industry in general? Like, where is all this going? 5 years, 10 years out?
Yeah, I think like there's you're starting to hear this term like longevity. You're starting to hear it more and more. There's some, like Peter Attia just wrote a book, Outlive, on longevity, and you know, any podcast you turn on in the health world, this is like a growing topic. And basically the essence of it, there are many factors that go into like being healthy and having a long health span, if you will. Training is one of them, and it's a key ingredient. So I think the focus on training is going in a direction where more and more people are getting interested in it, involved in it, you know, are developing confidence in doing it and competence in doing it. Right. So I think like the future is, how do you make it easier for folks to do the thing? Right. And so like today, if you know, I've got my Garmin on, right. And if I go for a run, my training session's on here, right. I can start running. It tells me, all right, here's your pace. And then once all right, now you're done with your warm up. All right, we're doing intervals. Right. And it all just it shows up on my Garmin. And it's what we call it like what we're doing today in the strength world is all active data collection. I need to actually check off the box that I did 5 reps at 200 pounds, right? But in the endurance world, they've already kind of bridged this gap between like what it takes to collect data, and that's like it's all passive data collection. So I think the future of our industry is making the actual prescription get to you faster and more efficiently. So like through things like your watch, different devices, and then collecting that data and bringing it back to your coach. So, this idea of like keep coaches connected to their athletes, it's tough when they're remote and when they don't understand everything that happened. But with technology and with device integrations and things like that, I think we're gonna have a lot of help in bridging that gap and giving a coach a holistic picture into what's going on with that athlete. And it's not just like the actual training; it's all the external forces that are maybe stressing that athlete or that person. That coach.
Sleep. I got my Aura ring on.
Exactly.
Measures the sleep and everything. Have you heard of blue zones before?
No.
Blue zones. You have heard of them?
Where people, maybe I'm wrong, but like where people live to be, 100 plus years old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 or something, or 4 or 5 or something in the world. There's one in Loma Linda, California. It's like right outside of Berkeley. There's one in Costa Rica. There's one in Sardinia, I think, Italy. And then there's one in, I think it's Okinawa, Japan. And I might be missing 1 or 2, but they basically the population regularly lives to be over 100 years old, and I've the scientists have studied it, researchers have studied it to try to figure out like what are the commonalities between these different blue zones. The number one thing is strong sense of community, like having a lot of people, family, neighbors, just like a strong community support system, like a purpose. People finding purpose in their relationships.
Yep.
As opposed to, I think like Western culture, especially in the United States, we tend to like be workaholics and, outcome oriented on, goals and business and stuff like that. But these regions, I think, are less of that and more family oriented. But also, like, I think, the other things in common was healthy diet, obviously. And I think they're all in like relatively hilly areas where it's like walkable towns that have lots of hills up and down streets, so you're kind of like you're kind of using your cardiovascular system a little bit, just getting around every day. So that was I think I might be misquoting some of the details, but that's I think what the science found about it. And I guess studying I have a few friends who are into the longevity stuff as well, so I've heard about it. I could do a better job, I think, with some of the diet and activity. I could probably be a little bit more active, but it's interesting. It's interesting that like I think all that stuff doesn't even matter. Even some people that live in these blue zones that are like smokers can live over 100 just because like that community aspect, that family community, purpose in relationships aspect seems to be the driving force for that.
Totally. Yeah. They seem to be like kind of stress-free environments, simpler ways of life, if you will. So I read a similar book called Ikigai, which is a Japanese.
Ikigai.
Yeah. But, and they found the thing to be the same. And I like, for me, I'm probably more interested in health span than lifespan. Like how long can you, and Peter talks about this in that book, but like how long can you keep doing the things that you love doing, whatever those things are? If it's hiking, if it's biking, if it's cycling, if it's swimming, if it's playing tennis or walking with your wife or whatever the thing is, right? How do you make sure you can maximize the amount of time that you can do that? And I believe that strength training and good coaches are a major ingredient in making sure that gets done, and you're seeing like, the future of this industry. I think coaches are getting scared of like AI and their ability to create training plans and stuff. Anybody can go get a training plan. Like we can go and Google some training plan right now and get it for free. And those like training plans are a dime a dozen. I'm not trying to discount like a coach's work. There's some brilliant stuff out there for sure, but like the best training plan is just the one you believe in and the one that you stick to. And a coach has a unique ability to make sure that they understand your motivations and keep you kind of accountable and on that track, right? And then everybody's life changes.
It comes back to relationships, man. It's the same thing we were just talking about. Like, having a relationship with a person who's like your advocate.
Exactly. That can make you feel a certain way, like for you, it might be, hey, like I want to make my coach proud. Or, for me, it's like, hey, I know my coach is looking at my training session. So I want to make sure that I get the training session, and like, hey, last week I did 4 of these and we're supposed to be progressing. Like I'm going to go for this fifth rep. And it's not because it's set it on my training plans. Cause like, I care about and want to make the coach that programmed it for me feel like his, work is worthwhile and I'm worthwhile. So
I downhill bike sometimes. I was up at Mount Vernon or Mountain Creek in Vernon, New Jersey,
Okay.
a few years ago, and there was this dude on the gondola who was like 75 years old or something. I forget, but I asked him, I was like, "Man, how old are you?" And he's like, he was in his 70s. And I did a run with him, and he's like hitting like 5 or 8 foot drops. He's like riding the berms. I was like, man, this guy is my inspiration. I hope I can do this when I'm 75.
Yeah, yeah, and you can, but I'm sure he's working for it,
Yeah.
or working towards it or whatever. But that's awesome.
So cool, man. Anything anything else you want to plug or close out on, or just any industry stuff you want to talk about?
I think like we tell the story of Train Heroic, and I think the reality is like Train Heroic, Training Peaks, and even the parent brand Peaks, where like we're very much at the beginning of this. There's a lot to come. None of it's been easy. Most of it's been luck and good fortune. Truly, like it's just been right place, right time, found the right person. They did the right thing. But it's all been a struggle, and we've made a million mistakes. Truly, we've made a million mistakes. I've seen money just burn.
I don't know any entrepreneur who hasn't.
Yeah. And I think like the reality is like, that's unfortunately for us, that's been the way to learn. If I can help accelerate somebody else's learning by talking about the mistakes that we've made, like I'm available. You can find me on Instagram, TrainHeroic Josh, or Josh at TrainHeroic.com. But like, I'm here for, other folks. If I can, be helpful in any way, I'm all about doing that.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me, man.
Cash flow? Did you clear your cash flow?
The head of AFSOC said to me, he said, "This is the single best investment that we've ever made in our operators." It's because everybody was using it, right? It's like you can have equipment that collects dust, or you can have equipment that's being used, and everybody was using it. And my point here is just like, yes, to answer your question, you can go at this different elevation and sell it in at the top, but we just didn't see the buy-in. Like we've done that even like with like corporate gyms, if you will, right? You sell it at the top, and now you're playing this game to really get it sold to each coach. When it's their idea, it goes much better. I used to have this mentor. He said, if you help them plan the fight, then they won't fight the plan.